She was poisoned with her child for hidden money, but she survived Thanksgiving, then outsmarted her parents and took it all. The November morning in Philadelphia was cold, with the street trees painted golden yellow. Amanda Clark walked through the suburban residential area where her parents lived, holding the hand of her 3-year-old son, Lucas. It was Thanksgiving Thursday, another precious day to spend together as a family. "Mommy, are we at Grandpa and Grandma's house yet?" Lucas asked, looking up at her. His small gloved hand was warm and brought comfort to Amanda's heart. "Almost there. Just around that corner," Amanda replied with a smile. Working as a nurse while raising her son as a single mother was never easy, but these family moments meant everything to her. Amanda's parents' house was a typical middle-class home, a 2-story red brick building about 30 years old, with a well-maintained small garden. The front door opened, and her father, Robert, appeared. "Amanda, Lucas, good to see you." "We've been waiting," Robert said as he picked up his grandson. Lucas hugged his grandfather happily. Helen's voice could be heard from the kitchen. "Amanda, I'm just preparing the turkey now. Should I help?" Amanda said as she took off her coat. "It's fine. You work so hard during the week. Today you should just relax. Family is what matters most." "Having 3 generations together like this makes me happier than anything," Helen said, wiping her hands and embracing her daughter. The living room had a fireplace burning, and family photos decorated the walls. The most prominent was a photo of grandmother Margaret, who had passed away 6 months earlier. Margaret had been someone special to Amanda. "Grandma was especially fond of you, Amanda," Helen said, gazing at the photo. "Thank you so much for taking care of her until the end. We were too busy to help much, but having you there was such a blessing." Amanda smiled slightly with a hint of bitterness. It was true that during grandmother's final 2 years, she had visited almost daily to care for her. Her parents only stopped by occasionally, and the actual burden of caregiving had fallen entirely on Amanda. Still, the time with her grandmother had been precious, and she had learned so much. "Lucas, would you like to help Grandpa set the table?" Robert suggested to his grandson, and Lucas nodded with bright eyes. Watching the two of them, Amanda felt once again the importance of family. Being a single mother raising her son alone was difficult at times, but she was truly grateful that her parents loved their grandson so much in the afternoon. Lucas began to doze off on his grandparents' laps. "Time for a nap," Helen said gently. Amanda took her son upstairs to the guest room and quietly put him to bed. When she returned downstairs, her parents were sitting peacefully on the sofa, chatting. "Let's make this a special Thanksgiving," Robert said. "Being able to spend time together as a family like this is truly a blessing." Amanda looked out the window. The trees in the yard were beautifully colored, and she could hear the laughter of families preparing for Thanksgiving from neighboring houses. At 6 o'clock in the evening, the dining room was filled with the traditional aromas of Thanksgiving. The turkey that Helen had carefully prepared was perfectly roasted, and mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, stuffing, and cranberry sauce were beautifully arranged. Candles were lit, and the family of 4 took their seats. "We have safely reached this day again this year," Robert said, clasping his hands together. "Let us give thanks to God and pray for our family's health and happiness." Everyone joined hands and offered quiet prayers. Lucas also put his small hands together, seriously imitating the adults with a solemn expression. "Now then, shall we each share what we're grateful for this year?" Helen suggested. This family tradition had continued since Amanda was a child. "I'll start," Helen continued with a smile. "This year, I'm truly grateful that our whole family is healthy and that we can spend Thanksgiving together like this. I'm especially proud that Amanda works so admirably as a nurse and is raising Lucas on her own." Robert nodded. "I'm grateful that I can enjoy my retirement, and most of all, having this adorable grandson is the greatest gift. Lucas, Grandpa loves you so much." Lucas laughed shyly and said in a small voice, "I love Grandpa and Grandma and Mommy too." The adults watched him with warm smiles. "For me," Amanda began quietly, "this year I especially realized the importance of family. I miss Grandma, but I'm truly grateful that my parents love Lucas so much and support us. Being healthy and together is the greatest happiness." As the meal began, conversation flowed freely. Robert carefully carved the turkey, and Helen balanced the dishes well on everyone's plates. Lucas tried to eat mashed potatoes with his hands, making the adults laugh. "Lucas, use your fork," Amanda gently reminded him, and Lucas obediently replied, "Okay," and gripped his fork clumsily. "This reminds me of little Amanda," Helen said nostalgically. "When you were about his age, you got covered in mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving dinner and Grandma Margaret scolded you." That's right," Robert continued, laughing. "But Mother always ended up spoiling Amanda. She'd say, 'This child will surely become a wonderful woman someday.'" Amanda replied bashfully, "Grandma always believed in me. She used to say, 'Amanda has something special about her.'" "You were such a grandma's girl," Helen smiled. "You were a kind child from early on. You couldn't leave anyone in trouble alone, so it was natural that you chose nursing as your profession." As the meal progressed, wine was opened. The adults relaxed, and conversation became more intimate. Lucas, receiving all his grandparents' attention, proudly told them about what happened at preschool. "Today, my friend Tommy fell down and was crying. So, I brought him a tissue," Lucas reported proudly. "How sweet, Lucas. You're thoughtful like your mommy." Helen patted her grandson's head. "Maybe he'll become a doctor or nurse in the future," Robert said jokingly. "He might follow the family tradition and work in a profession helping people." After the main course, it was time for dessert. Helen stood up and brought a special pumpkin pie from the kitchen. It had a beautiful golden color, and the cinnamon aroma was appetizing. "I made this with a special recipe this year," Helen said proudly. "I found Grandma Margaret's old recipe book and tried the traditional way. There's even a secret ingredient." "What's the secret ingredient?" Amanda asked with interest. "That's a secret," Helen smiled mischievously. "But I'm sure you'll love it. It's filled with Grandma's love." The pie was served to everyone with whipped cream, and coffee was prepared. Warm milk was prepared for Lucas. When Amanda took her first bite, she could taste something different from the usual pumpkin pie, a deeper, richer flavor. "It's really delicious, Mom. It's richer than usual pie and has a somehow nostalgic taste, thank you. Grandma's recipe really is special. When you make it with love, the taste changes too," Helen answered with satisfaction. Lucas also said, "Delicious." As he ate the pie with his small spoon, his cheeks smeared with cream looked adorable, and the adults watched warmly. After the meal, everyone moved to the living room. The fireplace fire was comforting, and the family sitting on the sofa felt pleasantly full. Lucas was sleepily cuddling on Amanda's lap. "Today was really wonderful," Amanda said from her heart. "I'm grateful that we can spend time together as a family like this every year. Dad, Mom, thank you always. We're the ones who are happy to have you and Lucas with us," Helen replied. "Family is a wonderful thing. Supporting each other, loving each other." "That's right," Robert nodded. "They say blood is thicker than water, and family bonds are the most important thing in life." About 30 minutes after finishing the meal, Amanda was the first to notice something wrong. An unpleasant feeling rising from deep in her chest, followed by gradually increasing difficulty breathing. At first, she thought it was from overeating, but the symptoms rapidly worsened. "I feel short of breath," Amanda murmured, putting her hand to her chest. She was sitting on the sofa, but for some reason it became difficult to stand up. "What's wrong, Amanda?" Helen approached with a worried look. However, there was something slightly unnatural in her expression. Almost simultaneously, Lucas, who was on Amanda's lap, began crying in distress. "Mommy, it hurts. My stomach hurts," the small voice complained, as his face turned pale. Amanda tried to hold her son, but her own body wouldn't move as she wanted. Her vision began to blur, and breathing became more difficult. "Are you okay? You both look pale." Robert stood up and approached, but his movements were strangely slow. As if he wasn't in a hurry, Lucas suddenly collapsed to the floor. His small body convulsed, and his breathing became shallow and rapid. Amanda could no longer stand and nearly slid off the sofa. "Call an ambulance." Amanda tried desperately to force out the words, but they wouldn't come out properly. Her throat was constricted, and just breathing took all her effort. "Oh my, how terrible. What should we do?" Helen's voice had more of an acting quality than genuine concern, but she made no move toward the phone. Amanda's consciousness was hazy, but her professional instincts as a nurse were sounding alarms. This wasn't simple food poisoning. Something extremely dangerous was happening, but her body completely refused to obey. Lucas's crying grew weaker. Seeing her son's small hand struggling on the floor, Amanda desperately tried to crawl closer, but her muscles had no strength, and her body felt heavy as lead. Then she heard her parents' conversation. At first it seemed to come from far away, but gradually she could understand it clearly. "This will work out perfectly," came Robert's voice. But it was completely different from his earlier worried tone, cold and calculated. "Without those two, the inheritance will be all ours," Helen replied. Her voice contained none of the motherly kindness from before. Amanda was shocked. Even as her consciousness faded, she could understand the meaning of this conversation. They had been poisoned, and it was by her parents. "It was frustrating that we couldn't get Margaret to change her will, but this solves the problem," Helen continued. "That old woman was stubborn to the end, making Amanda the main beneficiary. How ridiculous. $5 million is too large an amount, more than a nurse could earn in a lifetime, and now it will all be ours." Robert's voice was filled with satisfaction. Amanda collapsed on the floor, desperately tried to maintain consciousness. Her son Lucas could no longer even cry. His small chest rose and fell irregularly, clearly in mortal danger. "But are we really safe? Won't the police suspect us?" Helen asked, somewhat anxiously. "Don't worry, it will be treated as food poisoning. We'll say there was something wrong with the turkey. We were lucky to have mild symptoms, but those two didn't have the strength to survive," Robert answered coldly. "Still, I thought she was a good daughter, taking care of Margaret until the end. Who would have thought such a large inheritance would be left? Margaret was my mother, yet I can't understand why she favored Amanda, choosing a granddaughter over her own son." Robert's voice was filled with anger. In her fading consciousness, Amanda remembered her last conversation with grandmother Margaret. "Amanda, you're a special child, but be careful. Money can change people sometimes." Her grandmother's words came back to her. Lucas's breathing became even shallower. Amanda reached out to touch her son, but couldn't even move her fingertips. The helplessness of being unable to protect her son as a mother tore at her heart. "We should call an ambulance soon," Helen said, looking at her watch. "We need to make it look like we discovered them when it was too late. Let's wait another 10 minutes. We need to make sure," Robert calculated coldly. In the desperate situation, Amanda summoned her last strength to try to call her son's name. A faint sound came out. At that moment, Lucas opened his eyes slightly and looked at Amanda. In those small eyes, she could see fear and confusion, but also trust in his mommy. In her heart, Amanda apologized to her son. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry such a terrible thing happened, but Mommy loves you." Just before losing consciousness completely, Amanda thought she heard sirens in the distance, but she couldn't tell if it was real or a hallucination from her dying consciousness. Her parents' voices gradually faded away, and Amanda's consciousness sank into deep darkness. A white ceiling, the smell of disinfectant, and regular machine sounds. Amanda regained consciousness in the intensive care unit of Philadelphia General Hospital. Her throat was dry, and there was a dull pain throughout her body, but she could definitely feel that she was alive. "Lucas," Amanda first murmured her son's name. Looking at the next bed, she saw Lucas sleeping quietly with multiple tubes connected to his small body. Seeing his chest rise and fall regularly, tears of relief flowed. "You're awake." A middle-aged doctor in a white coat approached. "I'm Dr. Johnson. You and Lucas were brought in with severe poisoning." "Poisoning?" Amanda traced her memory. The Thanksgiving dinner, her parents' terrible conversation, and the moment she lost consciousness. Everything came back vividly. Blood tests and analysis of stomach contents detected cyanide compounds. The doctor continued with a serious expression. "It was close to a lethal dose, but fortunately, early treatment saved your lives. Lucas is also recovering." Then the hospital room door opened, and 2 police officers entered, an older detective and a young female detective. "Miss Clark, I'm Detective McBride." The older detective introduced himself, showing his badge. "This is Detective Rodriguez. If you're feeling well enough, we'd like to ask you some questions." Amanda nodded tensely. She was prepared for what she was about to be told. "First, I have some very difficult news." Detective McBride chose his words carefully. "Your parents, Robert and Helen were found collapsed at home after you were brought to the hospital. Amanda made a surprised expression. What? My parents? What do you mean? They died from poisoning by the same substance, Detective Rodriguez quietly announced. From the scene, it appears some kind of poison was mixed into the Thanksgiving meal. No, my parents. Amanda covered her face with her hands and let out a sob, but inwardly she was calmly analyzing the situation. The plan seemed to be working better than expected. What's strange is, Detective McBride continued, despite eating the same meal, you and Lucas survived. Robert and Helen seem to have ingested far more poison than you did. Amanda wiped her tears and answered, I don't really understand, but my son doesn't eat much, and he didn't eat much dessert either. I was also taking care of the child and didn't eat very much. In fact, Amanda had noticed her parents' suspicious behavior 3 days earlier. Sounds of them preparing something in the kitchen late at night, making secretive phone calls, and frequently discussing grandmother Margaret's will. Using her knowledge as a nurse, Amanda had purchased substances that would serve as antidotes from the pharmacy. On Thanksgiving Day, while helping prepare the meal, she had secretly replaced the poisoned pumpkin pie with a normal pie. Our investigation of the scene, Detective Rodriguez explained, looking at her report, found high concentrations of cyanide compounds in the pumpkin pie. Presumably, Robert, Helen, or both had mixed poison into the meal for some reason. My parents? That's impossible. Amanda put on an expression of disbelief. Why would they do such a thing? Detective McBride answered with a sympathetic expression. We're still investigating the motive, but it may be related to the inheritance you received from your grandmother Margaret. According to the will, you appear to be the primary beneficiary. Grandma's inheritance. Amanda pretended to be confused. I heard I would inherit something according to the will, but I didn't know the details. An inheritance totaling about $5 million, Detective Rodriguez explained, including real estate, investment trusts, and cash. Robert may have expected to inherit as her son, but the will leaves most of it to you. Tears welled up in Amanda's eyes. This time, they weren't acting. They were tears of gratitude to her grandmother. Margaret had believed in her until the end. Probably Detective McBride offered his theory. Robert and Helen planned to poison you and Lucas and inherit the estate. But somehow they ended up ingesting a lethal dose of poison themselves. I can't believe it, Amanda said in a trembling voice. I never thought my parents would think such things. We were family. It's a very painful reality, but money can change people, Detective Rodriguez said consolingly. Fortunately, you and Lucas survived. You can start a new life now. Later investigation revealed that the police discovered large debts in her parents' bank accounts. Robert's failed stock investments and Helen's expensive purchases had left the household finances in shambles. Grandmother's inheritance had probably been their last hope. A week later, Amanda and Lucas were discharged from the hospital. Reporters gathered in front of the hospital, but Amanda only said, I'm too grief-stricken from losing my parents to comment now. The local newspaper reported the incident with the headline, Thanksgiving Tragedy. Parents who plotted poisoning become their own victims. Neighbors sympathized with Amanda and offered support as a poor family. In a meeting with the lawyer, Amanda's inheritance of her grandmother's estate was officially confirmed. $5 million was an amount that could never be earned in a lifetime on a nurse's salary. Margaret truly loved you, lawyer Mr. Wilson said as he read the will. It says, Amanda understands true family love. I can entrust my fortune to her with confidence. Amanda smiled quietly. Her grandmother had believed in her until the end, and she may have seen through her parents' true nature as well. 2 months after the incident, the police investigation was completely concluded. The official conclusion was recorded as an incident where Robert Clark and Helen Clark attempted to poison their daughter and grandson, but the plan failed, and they became victims themselves. Amanda was treated completely as a victim and was never suspected. Her profession as a nurse, being in a position to save people, also helped clear any doubts. At night, after Lucas fell asleep, Amanda quietly spoke to her grandmother Margaret's photograph. Grandma, thank you. Thank you for protecting us. From now on, I will carry on your wishes and live righteously with Lucas. 6 months later, Amanda and Lucas began a new life in a new house in suburban Philadelphia. The single-family home purchased with grandmother Margaret's inheritance had a large yard where Lucas could play safely. The neighbors knew them as the poor mother and child who lost their parents in a poisoning incident and welcomed them warmly. Amanda continued her work as a nurse while being completely freed from financial anxiety, without worrying about her son's education costs or the future. She could feel peace of mind for the first time. One Saturday afternoon, while Lucas was playing in the yard, the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, an unfamiliar elderly man was standing there. "Are you Amanda Clark? I'm Dr. Wilson. I was Margaret's former primary physician." Amanda was tense, but welcomed him with a smile. "You were Grandma's doctor. Please come in." While drinking coffee in the living room, Dr. Wilson began speaking quietly. "Actually, I have something that Margaret entrusted to me." What he took out was a sealed letter written in her grandmother's handwriting. "This was entrusted to me a week before she died," she said. "If something happens to me and if Amanda is ever targeted by her parents, please give her this letter." Amanda received the letter with trembling hands. Inside was a long letter written in her grandmother's neat handwriting. "To my beloved Amanda, if you are reading this letter, it means my worries have become reality. I had long seen through Robert and Helen's true nature, their obsession with money and their jealousy toward you. I feared they might target you, but you are a wise and strong woman. I'm sure you can protect yourself and your beloved son." Tears overflowed from Amanda's eyes. Her grandmother had understood her until the end and tried to protect her. Dr. Wilson continued quietly. "I have worked as a doctor for many years, the situation after Margaret's death and the Thanksgiving incident. I understand everything." Amanda tensed. "What are you trying to say, doctor? I know you killed your parents," Dr. Wilson said gently. "But I respect Margaret's wishes and won't report this to the police. You acted to protect your son. That's natural for a mother." For the first time, Amanda shed real tears. Guilt, relief, and gratitude were all mixed together. "However," the doctor continued, "from now on, please walk the right path for your son's sake. Promise to live honestly as Margaret loved you to be." Amanda nodded deeply. "Yes, I promise. For Lucas's sake, I'll become the kind of mother who can live up to Grandma's expectations." That night, after Lucas fell asleep, Amanda went out to the garden and looked up at the starry sky. She remembered her son's anxious question. "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" "Yes, we are a real family," Amanda had answered. "Even with blood relations, without love, there is no family. Relationships bound by unconditional love, not money or profit, are true family." Returning to the living room, Grandmother Margaret's photograph on the mantelpiece seemed to be smiling. Amanda spoke to the photograph in her heart. "Grandma, thank you. I will pass on the true family love you taught me to Lucas." The grandmother's love left in the form of inheritance and the pure bond with her son. Amanda had finally obtained true happiness, relationships where people protect each other in difficult times, cherish each other, and can make sacrifices when necessary. That was the true meaning of family. The next morning, Lucas innocently asked, "Mommy, what shall we play today?" Amanda hugged her son and answered, "Whatever you like, Lucas. Just having you here makes Mommy happy." A new life was about to begin, filled with hope. In the quiet hours of the hospital room, as the soft beeps of the monitors filled the air and Tyler slept peacefully under the dim light, Jennifer Cooper sat beside her son's bed, holding his small hand in hers. For the first time since the nightmare began, she allowed herself to truly feel everything she had been holding back. The rage, the grief, the shattered trust. They crashed over her like waves she could no longer outrun. She stared at Tyler's peaceful face, still pale but alive, and the tears came without warning. In her mind, she replayed every moment she had once cherished, the mornings when she kissed his forehead before school, the evenings when he ran to her with drawings and stories, the way his laughter had filled their home like sunlight. She had trusted Mark completely, trusted that the man who once promised to protect them both would never let anything harm their son. She had trusted Sarah, the friend who smiled warmly at school gates, who hugged Tyler like her own, who shared coffee and secrets with her. And now, both of them had turned that trust into poison, literal poison that had nearly stolen her child's life. A deep, aching sorrow settled in her chest. She wasn't just mourning the betrayal of her husband or the cruelty of her friend. She was mourning the innocence that had been ripped away from Tyler. He had believed in people the way only a child could, openly, without question. He had called Sarah Mom's nice friend, he had looked up to his father with shining eyes, and now those eyes carried shadows of confusion and hurt. Jennifer felt the weight of guilt too, not for what she had done wrong, but for not seeing the danger sooner, for believing so blindly that her family was safe. Yet beneath the pain burned something fiercer, a mother's unyielding love and a quiet, unbreakable resolve. She had watched her son fight for his life in this very room, and in that moment, something inside her had shifted forever. She would never again let anyone come between her and her child. She would protect him with every ounce of strength she had left. The woman who once smiled politely and forgave easily was gone. In her place stood a mother who had stared into the abyss of loss and refused to let it win. As dawn crept through the hospital window, Jennifer leaned down and whispered to her sleeping son, her voice trembling but steady. "I'm so sorry, my sweet boy. I let them hurt you. But I swear on everything I am, I will never let anyone hurt you again. Not your father, not Sarah, not anyone. You are my whole world, Tyler. And from this day forward, it's just you and me. We'll build a new life, a real one, where love doesn't lie and trust doesn't poison. I promise you that." She pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead, the same way she had every morning for 9 years, and felt a single tear fall onto his cheek. But with that tear came clarity. The pain of betrayal would always linger, like a scar that never fully fades. Yet out of that pain had been born something stronger, a mother's fierce protective love, and the courage to walk away from everything she once thought was real, in order to save what truly mattered. Jennifer Cooper no longer believed in perfect families or unbreakable promises, but she believed in her son, and that belief was enough to carry them both forward, into a future where love would finally be safe.